Cool night air drifted through the birch forest at the very edge of the village, where an old footpath sloped down to meet the wide, dark lake. Fir torches still guttered from the midsummer celebrations, illuminating figures who danced late into the night. For centuries, villagers had flocked to the shoreline under the warm glow of the solstice sun, feasting on bread and cheese, telling old tales of spirits who roamed the waters at this special time of year. The festivities offered hope that harvests would be plentiful and that merchants passing along the forest road would bring fresh wares in the coming months. Yet a shadow lingered behind every joke and every toast. Whispers had circulated about the creature that lurked beneath the glassy surface, a spirit in the shape of a noble horse, waiting to lure unsuspecting souls into its watery domain. No matter how loud the lute players strummed, or how vigorously the dancers spun, a hush would creep over them whenever they glimpsed the moon's reflection quivering on the lake, as if from a great submerged breath. Eamon, a young warrior of stern brow and restless spirit, felt this shadow more acutely than most. He stood by the water's edge, just beyond the glow of the last torch, letting his gaze fall on the reflection of the tallest pines that ringed the lake. Midsummer's hush was broken only by the distant singing of a final alley of dancers up by the village. If he strained, he could almost sense a voice whispering along the ripples. But he shrugged it off. He had come of age in this village, hearing rumors of the so-called water horse. It was said to appear as a beautiful mare or stallion with a mane entwined in waterweed, beckoning travelers to ride along its back, only to vanish beneath the surface with its rider hopelessly trapped. The older folk boasted that they had known someone, an uncle, a cousin, who had glimpsed it or heard its shrill, otherworldly neigh. Yet the stories always ended darkly, with missing persons or tattered gear floating among lily pads. Eamon clenched his jaw. He had seen spectral illusions on misty nights before, but he had never laid eyes upon an actual monster. The idea both thrilled and unnerved him. That very night, a company of seasoned warriors, adorned in iron-studded cloaks, arrived in the village, bearing news of renewed troubles across the southern border. Their captain was a woman with long braids of copper hair and a hardened gaze. She spoke of marauding bandits, of suspicious folk who might be in league with older, darker powers. They planned to use the village as a place of rest before continuing deeper into the frontier. The promise of coin and glory drew the younger villagers to them like moths to a flame. Eamon, for his part, was enticed by their tales of heroism. More than anything, he longed to prove himself. In the glow of the torchlit streets, he introduced himself to the captain, whose name was Ruana. She eyed him with a slight, approving smirk. "We leave in 2 days," was all she said. But the words were enough to set Eamon's heart aflutter. That night, he found it impossible to sleep, his mind swirling with possibilities of battle and renown. Meanwhile, far from the bustle, an old, blind woman by the name of Ensnared sat beneath the arch of 2 linden trees near the lake. She was a fixture of the solstice gatherings, quietly humming ancient tunes while all else revelled. Villagers rarely disturbed her, for she was rumoured to know more about the spirits in the lake than any living soul. Her pale, clouded eyes seemed to gaze beyond the material world. People claimed that she once sacrificed something precious to the water horse, that perhaps her sight itself was the cost. Still, no one dared ask her outright. In the hush of the darkest hours, after the dancers staggered home, it was said that she occasionally left small wooden idols on the bank. Whether they were offerings or warnings, no one knew. On the morning following the warriors' arrival, Eamon woke to a golden sunrise. The lake had taken on a shimmering veil, reflecting one of the longest days of the year. Ruana's company busied themselves sharpening swords, polishing helms, and exchanging stories of scuffles won throughout the region. Eamon found them near the tavern's stable, where their horses had been watered and fed. His eyes wandered to the large black stallion, its flank broad and its mane braided in the style of travelling warriors. It tossed its head and stomped the ground. Fascinated by its strength and grace, Aemon touched its mane, marveling at the feel of it against his calloused palms. Rhoanna approached, leaning against the stable door. "We hunt for glory," she remarked quietly. "But never forget, the forest and lake hold secrets older than this realm. Respect them, or they'll devour you whole." That evening, while the warriors feasted in the lodge, Aemon slipped away to the shore. Drawn by an unspoken longing, he wanted a moment's reflection, to remind himself that though the path of battle was tempting, the forest and lake still demanded reverence. He recalled childhood nights spent at the water's edge, tossing pebbles and half hoping the rumored spirit would appear. Reeds swayed in a soft breeze, and the glow of a half-moon silvered the surface. He knelt on the soft mossy ground, listening to the quiet rush of water lapping at the bank. Though the night was warm, a slight chill in the air made him shiver. Suddenly, a movement at the far side of the shore caught his eye, a figure that seemed like a horse's silhouette, but taller, its mane glistening with something that might have been kelp. It half emerged from behind a cluster of reeds, as if testing to see if Aemon would flee, but he stayed, heart pounding, eyes round. He realized with slow dread that this was no ordinary animal. Its eyes flashed a deep, unearthly green. Through the hush, he thought he heard a voice, or perhaps a ripple in his mind. "Come closer. Let me see who waits." Aemon's breath caught. He willed himself to stand, to run, but realized his feet felt heavy as if bound by lead. In the blink of an eye, the silhouette sank back into the water, leaving only the pale circle of the moon's reflection shimmering in its wake. The next moment, a hand descended on Aemon's shoulder. Startled, he whirled to see Rhoanna standing at his side. She too stared out at the lake, her brows knitted. "So it's here after all," she murmured. She had either guessed or known more than she let on. Some travelers on the southern roads spoke of a spirit that tempts warriors. The bards sing a story of men who mount the horse and never return. She paused when Aemon did not immediately speak. "Come, the night is growing towards its darkest hour, and we should not linger by the water. There will be no sleep for you if you stay." But Aemon could not tear his gaze away. A swirl of water rippled under the moonlight, and he almost imagined the shape re-emerging, beckoning him once again. That night, he dreamt of swirling underwater caverns strewn with bones, of a whispering voice promising him glories unknown if only he dared to seek them in the lake's depths. When dawn arrived, he woke in a cold sweat, with a renewed eagerness to prove himself worthy of the valor he craved. Later that morning, as the warriors busied themselves for departure, leading saddlebags, counting provisions, checking their armor, a commotion erupted by the lakeside. A frantic villager had discovered a group of travelers' gear scattered on the bank, but no sign of the travelers themselves. A half-eaten meal was left behind, a quiver of arrows spilled in the dirt, and footprints vanished into the shallows. Rhoanna frowned at the sight, her hand tightening on the hilt of her sword. "This is no ordinary disappearance," she said. "We must investigate. I need a volunteer or two to scour the shoreline for traces of a struggle." Aemon immediately stepped forward, along with two of the more seasoned warriors, Connell and Laera. They carefully waded into the shallows and found that the tracks led deeper into the water, as if 4 or 5 men had willingly walked out where the lake dropped off into the unknown. A hush fell over the group. Laera, who had once delved into half-forgotten tombs, had a brow furrowed with concern. "It's got them," she whispered, unconsciously echoing the same hush that would befall the villagers in the presence of shadowy rumor. Connell agreed, but insisted they do something, perhaps try rope, diving gear, or a raft to search the deeper portion. Rhoanna ran her eyes over the still surface. "I will not send you to your deaths," she declared. "No one enters these waters without a plan. We leave tomorrow at first light for the border, but tonight, we gather knowledge." And so she cast a steady gaze at Aemon. "Seek out the one who is rumored to know the most, the blind woman Lasser. Offer her coin or favor. We need to understand the hold this spirit has. Aemon found Lasser exactly where the rumors said she would be, beneath the linden trees. The air was stifling even as the late afternoon sunk towards evening, and tiny insects buzzed around the mossy banks. She was humming an eerie tune, her delicate white eyes turned toward the path, as if she sensed his approach before he spoke. When he asked about the water horse, she only chuckled, a rasping sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "You yearn to face that which you do not comprehend," she said. "Like all young warriors, you think steel can cut through curses." She pointed one long bony finger toward the surface of the lake. "He is older than you can imagine, bound to the waters by ancient pacts. He feasts on the dreams of men who wish to be heroes. He shows them illusions of victory, wealth, admiration, until they are enthralled, and they follow him willingly to the depths." Aemon pressed her for a way to fight him. "Is there no sword? No spell, no charm that can break this hold?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. She cocked her head. "Fight him in his own realm and you will lose," she replied, "for water covers all footprints and swallows all cries. If you must descend, take with you a chain of silver. It is said that silver repels illusions, for it reflects truth." She paused, lips pursed as if tasting the words. "Yet know this. As soon as you venture beyond the shallows with the chain in hand, he will sense it. He will fight you not through brute strength, but through your deepest cravings, your hidden desires. If you cannot master those, you will see only what you long for most, and missing will become your fate." Later that night, while the rest of the village tried to sleep, Roana's warriors gathered around a crackling campfire near the main road. It was decided that 2 would remain in the village, at least until they were sure the danger would not strike again, while the main party continued on. Aemon insisted on staying. He recounted Lass's words about silver, about illusions, about the creature's cunning. At first, Cornwall expressed skepticism. How could silver ward off a spirit? But Roana weighed the possibilities. "We cannot leave the village under siege by this being, nor can we linger for days on end, losing men and women one by one. Aemon, you are determined. You will attempt to break the hold of this water horse. Cornwall, you stay as well. The rest come with me at dawn." Lyara seemed almost relieved to be following Roana. Her eyes betrayed the lingering dread she felt for the silent lake under the moonlight. And so, as the village roosters announced a new day, Roana's party departed. Aemon and Connell set about gathering items they might need for a confrontation. From the local blacksmith, they procured a silver chain meant for ornamental harnesses, hammered and tempered into solid links. They also took 2 potions from a traveling apothecary's trunk. One said to grant short-lived clarity of mind, the other to heal small wounds. When the sun reached its zenith, the 2 men stood on the shore, bodies tense with readiness. They waded slowly into the clear water, cautious step after cautious step. Aemon had the chain looped over his forearm, its weight oddly reassuring. The light of midday illuminated everything beneath the surface, the drifting fronds of aquatic plants, small shimmering fish, the pebbles and silt that formed the lake bed. But as they pressed on, the drop-off loomed. A shelf plunged abruptly into a dark expanse, vast and silent. The water beyond was a murky blue, like a sheet of tinted glass. Aemon took a breath, mouth set. He glanced at Connell, who nodded in determined solidarity. They drew deeper, halfway up their chests now, scanning the gloom for any sign of movement. No horse, no shining mane, not even a stray ripple, only the chill of water pressing on their skin and the occasional flicker of sunlight from above. Without warning, a shape darted beneath them. Aemon gripped the chain as Connell cursed under his breath. He glimpsed the flicker of a mane-like swirl. Then it was gone. The water horse was quick, cunning. The men felt something brush against their legs. An indistinct, sinuous presence. Heart pounding, Eamon held the chain in front of him, the silver gleaming in the greenish gloom. A hush enveloped them. Then the presence returned, this time gliding close enough that Eamon could see pale, unnerving eyes. The creature's muzzle pressed forward, an inviting tilt of the head, as though asking him to mount it. The voice that whispered in Eamon's mind was mesmerizing. "Brave warrior, see what glories I offer." Instinct told him to close his eyes, but he couldn't look away. Images swirled before him, a grand hall in which he stood triumphant, the dragons of the southern mount subdued under his blade, the roar of a crowd chanting his name. He saw his father's fearful eyes replaced by awe, saw the maidens weaving his laurels after each victory. All that he had hungered for since boyhood gleamed in this vision. He dimly sensed Connell was struggling too, maybe seeing his own illusions of success, or love, or redemption. The water rocked them gently, inviting them to accept these promises. But the chain in Eamon's hand felt cold, real and grounding. Some fraction of his mind recalled Lasserre's warning. Illusions feed on desire. The more you want them, the more they ensnare you. With a surge of will, he tightened his grip around the links. The silver glinted in the watery gloom, reflecting not the illusions, but the truth. He saw then that the glorious images were superimposed on the murky reality. The creature's mouth was parted, revealing a row of jagged, unnatural teeth. Instead of a regal ebony stallion, he glimpsed a twisted shape, slick with algae, tendrils of waterweed trailing from its mane. A bitter taste rose in the back of his throat, summoning all his courage. Eamon thrust the chain forward. An unholy scream tore through his mind, reverberating as though the water itself cried out. The lake churned, and a powerful current lashed around them. Connell was nearly swept off his feet. Beneath the swirling sediment, the monstrous shape thrashed, trying to evade the chain. Eamon lunged, seeking to coil the links around that dripping neck. For a heartbeat, he felt them catch, pulling taut. He sensed the creature's fury and terror. If only he could force it above the surface, or banish it. The runes hammered into the silver chain's simple protective sigils glowed faintly. For a moment, it seemed victory was within reach. But the water horse let out another howl, twisting its body with impossible strength. Eamon lost his grip, battered by a wave that stole his breath and forced him under water. He tumbled in the swirling gloom, arms flailing. He felt the chain slip away, tangling around something for an instant, only to be wrenched loose. Both men were momentarily pummeled by the depths. As soon as Eamon's head broke the surface, he choked in a desperate gasp, but found himself dragged out toward the deeper water, strong as if a rope had been tied to his waist. Connell's shouts echoed dimly. Eamon tried to resist, kicking with all his might. In the swirl of fear and adrenaline, a single clarity came to him. If he did not hold on to the silver chain, he would be lost like so many others. He felt the chain brush his hand, inches away. Blindly, he grabbed it, even as the waterhorse's enchantment tugged at his mind, conjuring phantom images of triumphant fanfare. He closed his eyes, focusing on the cold metal and the reality of his breath failing in his lungs. At that moment, Connell lunged forward, wrapping an arm around Eamon's torso. With the other, he caught a coil of the chain. Together, they pulled as if reeling in a monstrous catch. The water horse jerked them beneath once more, then pivoted. The connection gave a powerful shiver. For a second, Eamon thought his lungs would burst. Then the chain went slack. They burst above the surface, gasping and flailing their way back to the shallows. The bright midday sun dazzled them, and they could see villagers on the bank, watching with anxious expressions. Eamon could feel the water horse's presence still lurking in the depths behind them, but it no longer attempted to drag them under. The silver chain, shining even brighter in the sun, lay coiled near Eamon's arm. Once they were close enough to stand, Connell helped him up. They stumbled out, collapsing onto the grassy bank, retching up lake water. Moments later, the villagers crowded around, some with wide eyes, others offering cloaks and water. Eamon sat there, still trembling. In his mind, he could sense that the presence in the lake had receded. and yet he felt far from victorious. The water-horse was not destroyed. It had simply retreated. Wounded, perhaps, furious, certainly, but still alive. Cunral's chest heaved as he tried to steady his breath. "The demon is powerful," he said in a ragged voice. "We are mere mortals in its domain." One of the older villagers stepped forward, voice trembling. "Will it strike again? Are we safe?" Eamon exchanged a glance with Connell. The fight had proven that the water-horse was vulnerable to a certain extent, but also that it was not easily banished or killed. Reaching for the silver chain, Eamon rose on unsteady legs and faced the onlookers. "We drove it back," he said. "But beating it here and now might be beyond us alone. This lake is its lair. I suspect more must be done. Perhaps runic wards around the shore, or a more potent relic. We need knowledge older than what we have." That night, many villagers packed up personal belongings, worried that the spirit's wrath would come soon and without mercy. Connell decided to keep watch along the bank, spear in hand. Eamon, exhausted though he was, joined. Together they listened to every stir of the reeds and every distant plop of a fish in the water. Early in the morning hours, when darkness clung to the sky, Eamon thought he saw a faint greenish glow ripple across the surface. No monstrous shape emerged, but the sense of a hungry presence lingered. It would bide its time, perhaps waiting for the next chance to claim a traveler who was confident enough to consider themselves above caution. The lake remained chillingly still. As dawn approached, Eamon trudged back into the village. The silver chain looped around his belt. The belated roosters crowed and the sky wore a gentle pink hue. Lazaire, perched on a low wooden stool outside her humble cottage, seemed to sense his approach from afar. She turned her milky eyes in his direction. "You saw the illusions," she said softly. "You fought them as best you could, but the water-horse has devoured souls for centuries. Even if we drive it from this lake, it may end up in another, for that is its nature." Eamon knelt by her side, weariness etched in the lines of his face. "What can we do?" he asked. She pressed her thin lips together. "Rally your allies and come back with more than just silver. You must combine strength of heart with a fortification of the spirit. You must face what you desire most and renounce it. Only then will the illusions have no power." Though his limbs felt like lead, he understood. He carried within him a longing for renown, a desire that had nearly drowned him in the lake's illusions. He would need to master that longing, turn it into clarity, or else the next confrontation would claim him. Connell emerged from the shared watch, wiping sweat and lake water from his brow. Their brief nod exchanged mutual understanding. The village had survived this night, but the water-horse would linger as a threat until they found a permanent solution. They spent the next day working with the villagers who remained to erect small shrines and craft protective totems from silver scraps hammered into decorative shapes. Connell and Eamon recited simple incantations taught by Lazaire, hoping to deter further illusions and, for now, protect the unsuspecting. Yet even as they spoke the words and hung the totems on posts around the shore, Eamon sensed the uneasy presence beneath that dark surface, watching. The creature would not be bested by wards alone, nor by hasty courage. It would require deeper knowledge, possibly from the old scribes in the north, or from the border druids rumoured to wander with. By the time the moon rose high that second night, a heavy silence fell upon the water. No one was taken. No illusions beckoned them from the shallows. Connell eventually dozed off on guard duty, lulled by the stillness. Eamon, however, found no true rest. He paced along the shore, peering into the lake as if waiting for a final sign. At last, in the faintest reflection of moonlight, he thought he saw the shape of a horse's head break the surface. The mane seemed to twist with faint green luminescence. For several beats of his heart, it watched him. Then it sank below again, silent, as if acknowledging their temporary stalemate. Morning light revealed the lake to be calm, rippling softly under a mild breeze. The villagers whispered that the water horse was driven off, but Eamon knew better. It was still there, waiting. A part of him realized that he might be bound to this place until he discovered how to truly banish or break the creature's hold. He wondered whether Ruana's knowledge at the frontier battlefields might yield more clues. Perhaps the reclaimed tomes in old libraries could speak of the water horse's earliest bargains. Perhaps a druidic ritual at the peak of the next moon cycle could sever the old pacts. All he knew was that leaving the village unprotected in the long run felt wrong, and yet he was no different from those who disappeared if he let illusions seize him again. So, on that final morning, Eamon joined Connell in packing supplies. They would ride south to catch up with Ruana's company, carrying with them the story of their brush with the water horse. They would seek the runic wards lost in time, the protective spells that might drive such ancient spirits away. The villagers gathered to see them off, some with anxious tears, others with newly forged resolve. Lysair remained seated by her linden trees, lips moving in a silent prayer. With a final nod of goodbye, Eamon mounted a borrowed mare. The silver chain hung at his side, a reminder of what nearly pulled him under and of the small measure of hope that it, combined with courage and cunning, might eventually succeed in lifting the curse forever. The two warriors guided their horses along the path that wound away from the lake until the trees closed behind them. Cool daylight filtered through the canopy, and bird calls sounded in the distance. Eamon thought of the men who had vanished without a trace, lured by illusions of their heart's desire. He thought of the monstrous screech that tore through the water horse's domain when the silver chain tightened around its neck. Even now, the memory sent a chill up his spine. The path stretched southward still, and though an uneasy dread hovered, so too did an ember of resolve. They had taken the first step toward facing a spirit that had haunted the lake for generations. Whether they managed to succeed in its banishment would hinge on the strength of their hearts as much as the sharpness of their blades. And now the village behind them stood watchful, ringed by newly placed wards that caught the sunlight with a faint silver gleam. On the horizon, the faintest swirl of dust indicated Ruana's company. Eamon urged his mount forward, Connell riding by his side. They would tell the tale of the lake-bound spirit. They would return, armed with knowledge and new alliances, or they might not return at all. Still, there was a grim sense that come the next midsummer the water horse might again test the strength of mortal souls. It was up to Eamon, and any who stood with him to be ready when that moment arrived. So they rode into the rising sun, seeking a future in which nightmares no longer prowled the waters, where illusions no longer stole away the boldest warriors, leaving naught but sorrow in their wake,